Binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus.
This is The Ray Taylor Show.
Smile. It's a horror movie recently released in streaming. I do not remember which platform it was released in, but I had access to it. This is a horror movie that I heard good things about. Definitely heard a lot more about the marketing of this film, which I found to be really interesting and effective. It definitely made me excited to see this movie. And, it's a pretty good horror movie, I would say. There's been some better horror movies recently. Obviously, watching and reviewing movies like Barbarian or even Nope or The Red Phone, The Black Phone. I would say all of those movies are better than Smile. This movie I did enjoy, but I have criticisms of this movie. And it's a shame because I think with a few tweaks, this movie could have been a lot better. But it was a good movie, a very interesting movie discussing trauma, as so many movies and TV shows are really have themes related to trauma, to family trauma, to how trauma is passed from one person to the next. How it's kind of this, it's almost like a virus in a lot of ways. How trauma can be contagious. The idea that hurt people is a big aspect of this movie, Smile. And it's a movie written and directed by Parker Finn, so excited to see what they do next, because I thought it was an interesting concept. Obviously, like many horror films, are able to use horror as a metaphor for other things and to talk about deeper subjects through the lens of a horror film. And I thought this one did a really interesting job to illustrate how trauma is kind of passed on, and to have an antagonist, a monster in a way, that moves in similar ways. So I did appreciate that. And, of course, the smile aspect of it, very creepy. They nail the very creepy. It's like a very specific kind of smile that they nail, that is like a knowing smile of sinister things about to happen. And so they did nail that. But I would say that the idea of the smile in this movie, that knowing look of impending doom, right? This like dark, like sadomasochist kind of like excitement in tragedy that's about to happen, doesn't necessarily tie in to the overall themes of what this movie is also talking about in trauma. Like, that smile isn't necessarily something people would associate with somebody who has trauma, or who has been traumatized, who is causing trauma to somebody else. So in that case, in that instance, I would say that is a weak point, right? Where the smile is almost a gimmick. The way they were able to utilize the smile as a way to market this movie was brilliant. But how it ties in with the messaging of this movie, I felt like it was weak. And maybe there's a way to do it better. Maybe that's something that could have been fixed in writing. I definitely feel like it was an aspect of this movie that I expected to see more of, right? You have a movie, Smile. You see what that is, what that means in this movie when a person gives that smile. And maybe I would have appreciated it more if it was more present in the movie. Because you also have characters kind of going through a descent into madness, right? They're having a lot of paranoid delusions. And in those delusions is when they see the person with the smile, like they will envision somebody that's standing in front of them, having that smile at them, and that being part of why they're going crazy, that nobody else sees it. Maybe if, like, Like there's specific scenes where if like all of the characters who were present in this this delusional hallucination, paranoid delusions, if all like there was a scene where the main character is at a birthday party, and she sees one person sitting down that nobody else sees that has that smile. But if she then looked at everybody and all of the people, these friends, family, people that she know, if all of them had that smile, it would have, one, intensified the creepiness of everything, but also utilized that smile in a way that I feel would have made it a little bit more needed and useful and like necessary for this film that's called Smile, but really a movie about trauma and how trauma passes on, right? Which, you know, that smile isn't necessarily indicative of somebody who is dealing with trauma or any, like, it's definitely a smile that has a very specific purpose to it. So in that way, that kind of knocked this movie down, I would say, in my opinion of it. But the performances were great. This is led by Sosie Bacon, the child of Kevin Bacon, a great actress. I've seen her in a few things here or there, but I believe this might be the first thing I've seen her as the star, and her playing this character that is going through this descent into madness, this person that's having these paranoid delusions, these moments of like imaginary things that are happening that aren't actually happening. And I enjoyed her performance. I thought she was amazing. I can't wait to see what she does next. It was very refreshing to see a female actress who is able to act with her face, because her face isn't mostly paralyzed like the trend is with most females in general, whether they're actresses or not. The trend of Botox and things that are injected into women's faces to keep up with some ridiculous beauty standard in society, where they intentionally paralyze the majority of their facial muscles so they don't move. And in a movie, for an actor to give a performance, it's sad when you notice that somebody can actually give use their face as one of the tools to enhance their performance. So I appreciated that as well. I appreciated Sosie Bacon's ability to move the muscles in her face. Loved that. Sadly, it's a refreshing thing to notice in a movie.
Let's take a little break from the show to promote.
I figured out a way on my website to offer prints for every single painting. So if you go to a painting, you can buy the original painting or you can buy a print for everything. Artwork that you don't want to spend $100 plus on, 9 by 12 inch ink painting on paper, $100 for the original one-of-a-kind piece of artwork. Paintings range in price depending on their size. The 8 by 10 print, $20. Available in the store at inspireddisorder.com.
And now let's get back to the show.
I also love seeing Cal Penn in a movie. Anytime he's in anything, I enjoy that. So he's a small role in this, kind of plays her boss. She plays a therapist working in a hospital, dealing with mental illness, mental health, and so many characters in this movie are like, just have zero respect, have a complete lack of respect or empathy for mental health, for people who are having mental health problems, right? And it's because this movie is dealing with mental health as a major theme, trauma specifically being that type of mental health issue, people having mental breakdowns, having paranoid delusions, but then on the outside seeing people in law enforcement and just in general life having a very flippant attitude towards mental health is definitely, I think it's in this movie, I think it's intentionally used to provide contrast in those people who are not focused on the real issues of what's going on versus what Sosie Bacon's character's profession is, to help people, right? Because she has family trauma with we find out with the mental illness, mental health issues her mom had, with the suicide that her mom attempted or succeeded in. I kind of forget that detail. I think she succeeded in. How that broke up their family, and how she has this distance between her and her sister's family. So I think those attitudes towards mental health in this movie are intentional and illustrate what definitely a portion of our society, how they view mental health in general, right? Anybody, like, there's a huge portion of our society that think any kind of acknowledgement of mental health is just a weakness, right? They don't acknowledge mental health as something that should be, unless guns are being used to kill people, then they will blame mental health and not a gun. But as far as curing mental health, as far as people getting help for mental health, as far as trying to offer services for people who need help with their mental health, there's a complete lack of any care or concern, which I think, in addition to, I think that is part of why certain characters are so flippant towards the idea of mental health or somebody having a mental health issue. I mean, it's a massive issue in our society, and how it's treated, where somebody's having a mental break and police officers are just sent to go, in many cases, terrorize a person that is already in a bad mental place. Like, they are not there to, they don't show up to help, right? Anybody that thinks cops showing up at a situation are there to provide help don't know what's happening in the news throughout the history of policing. They must get all their viewpoints of how police act based on TV shows and movies versus the reality of how police officers act and respond to situations where people are in need of help. In many cases, in too many cases, a person who is in need of mental help and is sent police officers are pretty soon after no longer alive due to the actions of those police officers who were sent to, quote-unquote, help. So, this movie's got a lot of that stuff, which I found all that stuff interesting. Once you kind of find out the rules of what's going on in general, what's causing this character to have the descent into madness, causing them to have these paranoid delusions, and seeing the rules of this monster, right? And how, like, people are possessed. Basically, like, the smile indicates a possession, right? If you're seeing the smile, that means that you're about to be infected by the possession, right? It's about to transfer into you, or it's getting close for you to expel that demon or whatever it is, right? And how the demon is passed from person to person is through trauma, right? From somebody witnessing trauma, that person who experienced the trauma is now infected with that monster, right? Super interesting idea, right? A lot of horror movies have that kind of, I think, was it Falling Thinner? I think there's a Stephen King one where it's this kind of being that's passed from person to person. And this one, the way it's done is through trauma. And, that's a great way to communicate, that larger theme of how trauma spreads in reality, right? From people witnessing trauma, from people witnessing a death, a traumatic death, whether it's from suicide or from murder, and how that trauma infects them and changes them in their life and can destroy them mentally. But having that as kind of a rule for this horror villain to travel from person to person, very interesting. So it's like Sosie's character, she has a patient. The patient, says she's suffering from these things, the smile, somebody wearing a fake face, all these things. She ends up killing herself in front of Sosie. Now Sosie's infected with that thing. And to get away from it, there's been one survivor, and that one survivor figured out that if you kill somebody, it will pass that on to whoever witnesses the murder, right? Because it still needs trauma, and a death is one of the most traumatic things you can see, to see somebody die in front of you, and that trauma, that event is what allows this being to pass. So either you kill yourself or you kill somebody else. Either way, you need to have a witness to that, and that's when it passes. So super interesting. There's some character relationships in this movie that kind of came out of nowhere, right? Her character, what's her, instead of Rose, Cotter is Sosie's character's name. So Rose has a fiance, Trevor, which is like, and he can't deal with this, like any kind of hiccups in this perfect life that he has. He can't deal. But there's this like relationship she has with this cop that feels like it comes out of nowhere, right? Like he kind of hits on her one day at her job, and the receptionist like, she's got a fiance, right? Or she's married. I don't remember. And he's like, yeah, whatever. So it just seems like he's a cop who's likes her and is trying to hit on her. But then later on, she goes to him for help, and it's like they have this history together. Like maybe they dated before she got engaged or married or whatever, but that's like not communicated at all. It's just all of a sudden she's like confiding in him and talking as if they've had this relationship before, and it's like, what is going on? The way he acts at the very end of this film, not reacting to what's going on in front of him, not attempting in any way to stop the events that are happening, at no point attempting to stop the events leading up to the tragedy, or once the tragedy starts, like just standing there and watching it frozen. I don't buy it.
Let's take a little break from the show to promote
The benefits of Inspired Disorder Plus. So you go inspireddisorder.com/plus. Sign up, $5 a month. You get to binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free. You get to watch all of the live painting videos I do. You get a special members-only discount and deals for all of the artwork and merch that I sell. You also get the complete podcast back catalog of every podcast I've ever produced, hundreds of episodes, countless different podcasts. You also get access to my personal blog. A new blog comes out every week. In addition to that, you get my creative writing that I'm releasing. You also get access to Asking Me Anything. 14 years of experience podcasting. I've been creating art my entire life. I've been using Photoshop since middle school, and you can contact me to ask me questions about that or anything else. So those are the benefits for signing up for Inspired Disorder Plus.
And now let's get back to the show.
So there's some aspects of it that I didn't really get. It's like you have this relationship, or even just like as a human, you're seeing somebody do this to themselves. Clearly, you know what the next steps are, and you take no action to stop it, right? I know he's a cop, so cops are pretty great at just watching tragedies unfold in front of them while they do nothing. But it's the fact that this movie ends like a tragedy is interesting, right? It's like, oh, it's still like it clearly leaves it open for a smile too. But the way it happens, I felt I don't know. I had problems with it. So there's a few things I had problems with, but overall, I thought her performance, her descent into madness, trying to figure out what's happening to her, trying to figure out how to stop it. I enjoyed all that stuff. I enjoyed the themes of trauma and how that relates to the quote-unquote rules of this movie, of how this monster kind of translates. I thought the character design, when you actually see when that trauma is like visualized, that monster is visualized at the end of this movie, I love the way that looked, right? The character design is great. The moments of visual effects are pretty great. I enjoyed that as well. So there's a lot of things I did enjoy about this movie, but then there's big misses I think it has too, which I feel like just really could have just been tweaked, right? Set up that there was a relationship there before somehow, right? Like, he goes, like, it could have been so easy. Like, him, the receptionist is going, he's like, all she had to do was, like, you had your chance, bro. Right? And that already implies that there's a history between him and Rose. Right? So later on in the movie, when she goes to him for help, and it has, like, this clear that they had a thing at one point, it wouldn't be out of nowhere. And at the end, have him, he could attempt but fail to intervene, but to have him frozen before, before the, everything goes up in flames is just, I don't know. It felt it didn't feel like, I don't know. I didn't buy it. Right? Like, just no reaction at all. Right? But I guess, reality, sometimes people freeze. But still, I mean, I can understand freezing if you were to witness the ignition of that event, but not to see the slow motion turn. You know what's going to happen. You see what she just poured all over herself. Like, what's going to happen, right? The steps are involved of what she's doing, and you're just standing there watching. I didn't really buy it. But yeah, other than that, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was fun, and what I really got the most out of this movie is that I want to see Sosie Bacon do more acting. Right? I'd love to see her in other lead roles. And if they do another movie, maybe a budgetary increase would allow the writer-director to maybe iron out some issues. Maybe there was cuts made in this movie that led to those minor quibbles, that these minor things that, like, super noticeable and took me out. Right? Because I don't want to, when I'm watching a movie, right, I'll go along with whatever you set up, the rules of whatever, I'm there. But, like, when there's things that can happen that take me out, it sucks, right? Because I don't want to be taken out of the movie. I want to go on this ride. And, a few small things, minor quibbles with this movie that overall I thought was fun. Not my favorite horror movie of the year. It's not a bad horror movie by any stretch of the imagination. Definitely does some interesting stuff, so I appreciate that. Right? The execution is where the failure was, not the intention. The intention, I thought, of this movie was great. So check it out. It's Smile. Do it.
New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere our podcasts are found. Binge the full week over at inspireddisorder.com/plus. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.